Just, I don't know, COVID-19 was just a big couple of like those, that the impact that it made over those couple of years, like when it really, kind of showed itself, really, really showed us who we are, right? I mean, for me anyway, I know I saw like personalities in people that I didn't know they had. People were angry. People were afraid. It was a lot of emotion going around, and I think that it's fair for us to be honest and say, you know what, this is what I feel about this, and there's nothing wrong with someone saying, you know what, I think everybody should get vaccinated. If that's what you feel, that's what you feel. Especially if you feel like you have the training or background to support that, right? And then also, I think about what you said, Stacey, in regards to when mothers are pregnant. I do agree that I think that there should be a different time to have that conversation, right? I remember, in labor, I didn't want to talk about nothing. I didn't want to sign nothing. I didn't hardly want to see anybody. I barely wanted my mother in the room. Like, leave me alone, And so I definitely didn't have the right mind to make those type of decisions, right? And so I do agree that we could maybe look at a different way of introducing that information. I mean, maybe at an appointment before you even go have the baby. Like, why don't you talk about it then, as opposed to when, in between contractions, and it's like, sign this, they give you these papers and, you don't even know half the, what you're looking at. So I do agree with that part of it. Yeah.
I have a hard time with the fear that was expressed upon everybody in healthcare, outside of healthcare during the COVID time. And I will say that when I was working during COVID, I would have people come up from the ER to my neuro floor, admitted for COVID. They would get an administrated dose of remdesivir twice in the first 24 hours. And then after that, if I had a group of patients for 3 days in a row, and my patient got progressively worse, and their kidney function got progressively worse, and they ended up having to go up to the ICU for more treatment because, you can say your causation and make it sound like it's just coincidental, but when you see the same patterns over and over, and you know that remdesivir was pulled off the market for treatment of Ebola because too many people died, something within me, my grandma fell and hit her head, got tested for COVID in the ER, went upstairs, got the remdesivir dose because that's what we do to treat it while we're in the hospital. Let's not even get back on the dollar amount that the hospital made off of her. But grandma had pre-existing kidney disease and grandma died. And so after that, my aunt was admitted to the hospital for DKA, and I talked to the ER nurse and I said, she can't have remdesivir. And for those of you who don't know medical, as a diabetic, your kidney function is already wacky. It goes hand in hand. So I said, she can't have remdesivir. They put it in her chart, thank God, because when you go to the ICU, they're not getting your permission for the treatment. It's just what you do. So if my uncle didn't know, because I planted the seed of don't let her have that medicine, if he didn't know, she would have just got the medicine and God only knows what would have happened. But my Aunt Marie lived because she didn't, or in my opinion, in her happenstance, she didn't. And so I don't think it's fair to just say, maybe it's coincidental, because you know what, maybe it's not. And in my personal experience, when I saw people decline over my 3 shifts in a row and have to go to the unit and be put on a ventilator, and then the family's in that situation. And then I have my personal experience where my aunt shouldn't have, with what everybody said about COVID, oh, she has COVID and she's got her diabetes in a whack, like she really shouldn't have made it based off of everything else. Well, that was the differentiating factor. So I don't think medicine is perfect. And frankly, I think that it's so multifaceted, like you said. But like that part isn't talked about. And so when they were saying how many COVID deaths there were, that part was left out. The general population did not know how it was being treated, with what, how, or why. It was just, oh, that's what we do. And the pulmonologist that said to my aunt, why aren't you taking this medication? She said, why don't you tell me why it's good for me? And he couldn't. He said, that's what we're doing. There's studies on it, but that's not good enough when it's factoring her as a person. So in my personal experience, I don't think it's fair to say maybe it's happenstance, maybe it's not, because maybe there is correlation and we just don't want to talk about it.
Thank you. Yeah. Catherine? Yeah.
Well, that's why we do studies, right? Because one-off, everything is complex and complicated and interrelated. And when somebody's in the ICU, it's typically because, things are seriously wrong. So even if somebody's going to the ICU, even before they get a medication, there's a lot going on. So it's really hard in one case or 10 cases or 20 cases to really know what's what. And that's why studies are done looking at these things. And so making these determinations on such, a relatively small number of situations is really tough to do. And that's why we have to look at bigger populations and studies and look at the sciences and what happens if people get this and if people don't get this. And that's why we have studies and research.
I just don't think that they were actually collecting all of that data. I don't think they looked at the COVID deaths and said, how many of these patients that died with COVID got remdesivir? I don't think that was part of the data. I have looked and I have not found it. So that's where I'm saying I don't think even as a whole, as a population, we have all the information.
Yeah.
I don't think it's all being studied or divulged.
Yeah.
So what could we do? So
Thank you,
like
Catherine.
I hear opposites, like get them all, they're safe, everything's fine, there's studies. And then on the other side you hear don't do it, so there is that polar end of things. I get it. What can we do to make them more safe is one thing that I've had people ask, like, well, if there was a magic wand, what could you do if you could do anything so everybody would get vaccinated? And I'm like, that's a good question, actually. Like, what could we do? So I work with genetics, and I look at specific genes that actually give way to why some of the bodies come in and they do have a problem with a certain treatment, and why some people come in and they do have no complication, right? So I wonder if maybe implementing some sort of like we do with GeneSight with neuromeds, what if we could do that to find safety in an infant to see if there's any gene disposition that's going to make them have a reaction? What could be a solution to this instead of just one side saying, no, don't do it, and the other side saying you're irresponsible if you don't do it?
Well, yeah.
What could we do?
That's the question. How do we, and that goes back to Brit, like, how do you do that, right? And I don't know if we have an answer to
I know.
that.
I just wanted to provoke it though, because I see people on both sides every day. I have someone who works for NIH that comes to see me, a naturopath. We have some differing opinions, but they're there for a common reason, which is wellness. So how do we introduce that idea? So I want to provoke that thought.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think that having these type of conversations is one way to do that, to start having that, because a lot of times people just kept it to themselves, or they would kind of murmur amongst their groups or in their chat, little chat groups and stuff. But I think that us being open and honest about our experiences, because even when and this is not any slight, but even when we look at big numbers, one person's personal experience is huge to them, right? That is huge to them. So we have to make sure that we, honor that. And not saying that you aren't, I'm saying we collectively have to honor that, because people, when they lose people, or lose a family member, they don't care about the thousands of people that were studied. You know what I mean? And so being able to have these type of conversations to open that dialogue is so important. And I also appreciate people in the medical field. Again, I don't have a clue half the time, right? All I know is that my own personal experience or somebody else's personal experience. So it does help to weigh in from someone that has more of that in-depth knowledge. I mean, that is so important. And that's why we have to open up these type of means of communication, to be able to talk and share our experience. I think about Dalton, who was supposed to be here his experience is so real. I mean, it's a real experience. Somebody else here at this table, is a real experience. And so having those dialogues is so important. So I appreciate you, Kathy, for holding it down at the table as kind of like on that side of that perspective, because it's so important for us to hear from each other. So we have time for one more question or comment?
My hesitancy regarding vaccinations is, and I don't know all the ins and outs of everything, so I'm open to anyone on the panel or more than one person sharing their knowledge regarding the safety testing that has been talked about. So the bits and pieces that I do know, the concerns are that there's a lack of like placebo testing with vaccines, that they're being tested against another vaccine, which would, not give true numbers and true accurate representation of things, and then long-term studies. So I think, Catherine, you mentioned, looking for signals and things like that. Obviously, red flags that happen after vaccination is given, but does anyone know long-term studies that are being done so the placebo issue and the long-term, anyone up there want to comment?
I have nothing to say about that. I have no idea. Anybody have any input on that?
So I know that what I've seen recently and talked about in some of those small groups is that they actually test for 5 days for some. They test real small group samplings, and these are physicians who are speaking about it. So I'm not sure where the extensive studies are hidden. I do a ton of research, and some think I'm on like Wikipedia or something. I think that's what they look at moms sometimes, like they're Googling to see what's going on. But when you look at the CDC website and like Johns Hopkins and some of these big medical conglomerates, you get to see what they're actually studying in that. And I've looked. I'm open for anybody to share where they're finding resources.
Yeah, thank you.
So I think, there's different looks at different vaccines and periods of time. Some studies are looking at antibody production and equating that, with effectiveness. Other studies are looking for occurrence of a disease, and those have, variable times which they're studied. So there's a lot of different studies out there. Is there a particular one you have interest in?
Well, no, I just have general concern, but my overarching concern would be if we're administering a vaccination and then tracking that person for 5 days, and as long as they don't come down with, diabetes, something like that in those 5 days, are we then considering that vaccination safe? In just using that 5 days.
In general, yeah.
Exactly know, but are we studying these on top of each other, like long-term for years, to see if that group is more susceptible to diabetes or other chronic conditions? Or is it just kind of like that small, shorter window?
So most effects show up in like 40 days or something on that timeline. And
Well, would something like diabetes, though, if an infant was given a shot, diabetes would show up in 40 days?
no. So you're talking about chronic longer-term conditions. And I'm not familiar with those studies. That would be something I would have to do a little research in.
Yeah, in the small amount of research I've done, it's not extensive by any means, but that's really where my hang-up lies in the longer term. What are we looking at? And then not comparing people who have not received any vaccine to people who have received a vaccine. That would be like a true, accurate study.
It's hard to do those studies because most people have received at least some vaccine.
But there's a good chunk of people who haven't. So worth the study, right? What if it was 100 people worth the study, 100 versus 100? It'd be worth the study.
You'd have to get them to agree first. I mean, how are you going to get them to participate if they won't even go get a vaccine? They're probably not going to give you updates on their overall
I would
health.
say that's kind of a misrepresentation or an unfair generalization.
It probably is, but it's
again,
my
when you come back
assumption.
to the safety of it, I myself am concerned, like, if we're comparing a vaccine against a vaccine, that's not a placebo, that's not showing us a safety, that's not an indicator of safety. And again, open to anybody who hasn't thought about that. I keep staring at you because you give good eye contact.
Catherine.
You seem really knowledgeable, like you have a lot of information. I could tell you were like a study kind of person, but open to anybody. I'm just concerned about that.
And we do have some other people here in the medical field that going to stay after for us a little bit, that if they can maybe, because I have no idea, I don't know, right? And so, I mean, some of us here are just,
I'm not a medical person.
right? And so we have a different group of experiences up here. But yeah, we have a couple. Oh, go ahead, Catherine.
No, I was just going to say, so if you're looking at a vaccine that prevents disease A and somebody's vaccinated and somebody's not, the person who's not may have gotten disease A, and it could be disease A is related to diabetes. So I think it's, it's very complex, and I don't think we're to that point yet to be able to totally decipher your question, but from what's been seen, there's not been correlations in terms of chronic disease that I'm aware of.
Kind of an abstract thought I was having too was the schedule when we were, so I'm 46, and so when I got vaccinated, I got 8 vaccines. Now we have over 72 that little ones are getting, up to big ones, right? And that is a concern, that's why some of these like studies, I don't know where the studies would even come in, how the health of the population has shifted from maybe the 70s and early 80s all the way up to now. I mean, are people looking at like the childhood wellness versus, what are we looking at? I don't know. I sit and I think about this because people come in with various ideas, and I feel like nobody should ever be overlooked or dismissed. So I see what you're saying with that wonder that you're having,
I would love to go ahead. I think most people on both sides are looking for transparency. I think that's where we can meet in the middle, is that we're all here for the health of all people.
Right.
Some think we're selfish, some think we're this and that. I think transparency is what most people are looking for.
Yeah.
Showing studies, showing data.
Yeah.
I think
And
though,
move forward.
and I think if you're gonna look at that stuff, though, I do think if you're talking about wellness, you have to think holistically. And I do have to agree with Catherine that we put more than just vaccines in our body. I mean, our environment in itself, it has an impact on us. So you do, if you're gonna talk about diabetes, you gotta talk about what you're eating and what your parents ate, and what your grandparents ate. I mean, your DNA has evolved, and we say that all the time. There's more chemicals in our food now than there was, generations
Even 10
ago.
years
So
ago.
yeah.
Even 10 years ago.
So I think that if you're asking for that information, you can't just assume that it's the vaccines that are causing all this stuff, because there's a lot of other things that are going into our bodies.
I think that's true, but there's also something to be said about ingesting versus injecting.
But you're
Let her
ingesting,
finish
I'm
that.
sorry.
Finish your thought, hold on.
That's very
Sorry.
different, and
Yeah.
the potency is significant.
Yeah, but I think you're ingesting more than you're injecting. You ingest
You're saying that
daily.
what you're ingesting
Yeah.
has greater, you feel like it has greater impact than
Yeah.
what you're injecting, is what you're
Yeah.
saying?
But
You're
but if a certain element gets into the blood, it's in the blood. Whether you breathe it in, whether it gets injected, or whether you
I
ingest
disagree.
it.
But when you digest things, your body is made to filter out that waste.
The
But-
mucous
When you
membrane.
inject something into your blood, that's very different.
That's correct, but think about the amount that gets injected versus the amount we consume. So aluminum, for example, if we measure aluminum in the blood, most of that is because we consume it. And when they have looked at babies who get vaccines that have a tiny, tiny amount of aluminum, and they measure the blood level before and after vaccine, there's no measurable difference of aluminum. And that aluminum comes from either breast or bottle feeding. So again, if something gets into the blood, it's in the blood, no matter how it gets there.
So aluminum doesn't stay circulating though in the blood. It would have an affinity to tissue, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it retreat into the bones or the brain or the heart or somewhere? Am I mistaken? No. Okay. It wouldn't maybe come up as a measurable in that moment, but when we keep talking about like measurements and such, that's why I brought this as a reference. When we say little bits of aluminum, we're talking above the actual limit for any one time our infants are getting for, even the hepatitis B vaccine, different ones that they get in combination. It's more than, I guess, what the safe acceptable limit is. We should probably look at that.
So, Catherine, I'm gonna let you say that thought, and I apologize because we do have to leave tonight. And it always happens like this, right when it starts to get, we all start to feel comfortable with each other. We feel like we're now friends and we can talk. That's when time is winding up. But I want you to finish your thought, and then we're going to start wrapping up. Sadly,
So in terms of
enjoying this.
aluminum, if you look at the aluminum that babies are exposed to, the vaccines have a very small amount compared to what they're getting in from feeding. That's all I was saying. In terms of the information that I've reviewed and read.
Right, and going back to the ingestion versus injection, that's what I was thinking too.
Well, first of all, I appreciate everybody's input. I think that this is so important to me. I really love this. I love that we are able to be civil and respectful in our differences, because people, and what I always tell people is that we all, as humans, have like fundamental things that we want in our life, which is safety, to be healthy, and to like joy. We all want to be happy and feel like we have a tribe. And what safety looks like to everybody is different. Right? Some people feel like safety and being healthy is different. Some people believe it's, getting shots, and then some people believe that it's not. That's their way of being healthy. And so, but at the end of it, everybody wants to be healthy, right? And so I think that having these type of dialogues is so important. And I think it grows us as people to hear from each other and to learn from people's experiences. So I appreciate everybody for weighing in on this. I appreciate everyone for being respectful, and I appreciate everyone for sharing their stories, right? Stories are so important in this, because we can read stuff all day long, but sometimes, hearing people's experiences is what shapes our empathy and our compassion for each other, right? So I just kind of asked one question is, what is one thing that you heard tonight that maybe challenged or expanded your thinking? At the end of all of our conversations, I always think, what are you leaving with? And, this is kind of like starting the conversation. I hope that people continue it, and I hope that people ask some of our health professionals some questions afterwards. And again, I just want to make sure I'm clear that this was not a, anti-vaccine conversation. This is a conversation. Right, for people to be able to share their thoughts and their experiences. And it just so happened that the other two people who were very pro backed out on you, Catherine. So you should, take that up with them. So I'm going to end with our closing remarks. Thank you for sitting at the table with us tonight. I truly do. I really, really appreciate it. This was a brave conversation, so I appreciate you all for coming. As we close this conversation, we're reminded that public health is not just about policies or prescriptions. It's about people. It's about trust, lived experiences, and the courage to ask hard questions, even when the answers are unclear. Each of us carries a story, a reason, a wound, or a belief that shapes how we show up in these moments. And yet the deeper invitation remains to lead with empathy, to listen with curiosity, and to remember that community doesn't mean we'll always agree, but that we're still accountable to one another. So as we leave tonight, may we carry not just our opinions, but our responsibility to reflect, to stay open, and to care even when it's hard. Thank you for being part of this space and for allowing real stories to live here. I just want to close really quickly with thanking our team that helps make this possible. I cannot do it alone. I don't do it alone. So I appreciate them for helping out. Everybody on our team is just phenomenal. We have the best team in the Great Lake Bay region, and I will argue anybody that says something different. And I want to thank them, and I also want to thank Davenport University for letting us host it here. It's been great. So we are having a good time in this space. I really love that it had the tables. You guys could enjoy your drinks and your donuts and all that good stuff. So that was great. And we want to thank My Michigan for helping partner with this and making this conversation possible. When My Michigan approached us about this, they wanted to hear from the community. They were open to hearing why people, had different thoughts or different questions and concerns they had. So I really appreciate them for being open to hear people's conversations as opposed to dictating what people should think. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much, My Michigan. We also want to thank the Michigan, the Midland Community Health Department. Is that the full name? Am I saying it right? Tell me, correct me. Midland County Health Department, right?
Midland County Department of Public Health.
I said it all wrong. I should have had my paper. Thank you so much. I appreciate you all for being here. Both tables have resources. If you all have more questions or want to kind of learn more, they have things there. So I appreciate you all for coming. I truly do appreciate that. And then we want to thank Barney's Bakery for the donuts and Live Oak Coffee House, one of my favorite places. If anybody follows me on social media, they know I love Live Oak. I'm always there. So thank you so much for the coffee. And I think that's everybody. And thank you all. I appreciate you all. I really do. I appreciate you all for coming out and having this dialogue, for being open and sharing your experiences. And thank you again to our panelists, our guests at the table. We appreciate you all. You all have a great night. Thank you. Thank you so much. The video. Thank you.